All right, hey, welcome back. Hope you all enjoyed the last episode where we discovered a little bit more about some of the what? Some of the tactical issues of France.
Operational.
That's a good idea.
That's good because
Yeah.
there's tactics, which is individual. Operational, which is what we're talking about. And strategic, which of course we talked about as well.
Yeah.
France's strategy was to protect the Maginot Line,
Well,
and their political will did not allow them to continue to the line to block off Belgium.
yeah.
I'm sure there were some people that saying build that wall.
Well, sure.
Because
yeah,
they
a little precursor to someone else that we will remain nameless at the time. But again, the idea is we as a society during this pre-World War II era was not wanting to go to war. I mean, we were doing everything we could to prevent the war. And well, after what we saw with the Munich conference, after what we saw with the Anschluss and all of the territorial grab of Germany, it was just inevitable that they were going to turn tail and come over to France.
it just seemed like once France declared war, that's where the war had to go next.
Sure.
It'd be kind of weird to I don't even know what the what if would be. If the Allies would have said, "No, Poland's not worth it."
Well,
I just don't know.
You're right. I mean, it is a difficult decision to say, well, are we going to go and support these people who are ultimately going to get ran over, or...
Well, it would guarantee that the French and the British could never have allies of small countries ever again, because everybody was already scared because they just let Czechoslovakia dangle.
Oh, right.
And then they promised an alliance with Poland. If they would have let them dangle, I think...
We would have been...
I just don't think they had a choice but to go to war.
And so what we eventually do see is, of course, a pseudo-war, a phony war, as it is called.
Real quick, yeah.
Where, again, the Germans are going to have a quick head fake, a rope-a-dope, if you will,
Yeah.
of the fact that they are going to come over into, Western Germany, Eastern France, trying to say, hey, we're here, but it's all a ploy.
Well, they go into the Netherlands, which falls fairly quickly. The Netherlands
Within a month or two.
Oh, I don't even know. It took more than a couple weeks.
Oh, you're right.
Because the Netherlands was completely neutral in the First World War.
Yes.
Didn't take part.
Right.
And it had maintained that neutrality, so it had no military ties with France or England like Belgium did.
Right. True.
Belgium was neutral after the Munich conference reestablished their neutrality, but the relationship was already there.
Yes.
The contacts between the general stabs and things like that would have been already there. But, the Germans, Guderian and Manstein, they're two real innovators when it comes to armored warfare.
Of course.
Come up with a modified Schlieffen plan.
Yes.
And they push that infantry army, just like World War I, except they're backing up and they're taking the Netherlands this time.
Yes.
In through Netherlands, which falls very quickly.
Into Belgium.
Into Belgium. And the French and the British have no choice but to go to Belgium's defense. They can't just sit there and wait in fortified, not really like the Maginot Line, but still,
Right.
If you have time to dig pillboxes and trench lines, it makes it more difficult even for tanks.
It cannot be a sit and wait for the next offensive.
Right.
They have to go and protect at least something. And so, as you'll notice again, we do see in this quasi or regenerated Schlieffen plan that the Germans are able to completely overrun anything really north of Luxembourg.
Yeah.
And taking much of northern France, right there by, of course, the port of Calais, and unfortunately Dunkirk as well. And what we did leave off last time, we didn't quite touch so much on Dunkirk, but that's what we want to focus on today, in the beginning at least. And so, what is taking place in Dunkirk?
Well, first, you have that armored hammer just go pounding through the lines out of the Ardennes forest.
Right.
And once again, really, other than invading Poland, ever since that, the Sitzkrieg, followed by the invasion of Denmark and Norway,
Right.
and then the invasion through the Netherlands, the Allies are always being caught flat-footed. They just don't know what the Germans are going to do next. The Germans have the initiative. So they responded to Belgium, and this armored column basically just runs behind them, cuts off their supply lines. The German army, the regular guys, not the armored guys, the regular guys are freaking out because you just can't have the armor running along by like that. They'll get cut off.
Well,
and the British and the French try, but the Germans are always just getting there with just enough infantry to hold the line. And then the whole army's trapped up there. The Germans get to Calais. The British start retreating backwards towards Dunkirk, and the French, you know, people joke about the French, but they're actually pretty good at fighting, and they're pretty brave.
Right.
And they basically say, you know, the British get out, and the French will stay and hold the line. And the line contracts towards Dunkirk.
Sure.
And this is where we talked about last time, Operation Dynamo. Every little boat that could get across the channel and back was going to to Belgium, technically.
Right.
Well, it's France, just barely.
Yeah, just a little
Just a
over
little
the
bit.
French border, yes.
They're going there and they're taking people off the beach. The lines, if you've ever seen the movie, it does a really good job of showing the lines of troops wading into the water.
Right.
Some of them getting on boats that can only hold 6 or 8 people.
Right.
But it's better than staying.
Right. And again, at the same time, as you are standing in formation, waiting to be picked up, you've got the Luftwaffe. And they're coming in and they're dive bombing, and they are trying to just get as many troops as they can destroyed before Operation Dynamo can really be successful.
And that comes back to Hermann Goering.
Right.
A World War I ace, by the way, so not some little chicken liver who had no clue what airplanes could do.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a guy who flew and was an ace. He flew with Richthofen and all the famous people of World War II.
Almost,
or one.
what was it, the Flying Circus?
Richthofen. I don't know if he was in the Flying Circus, but he knew of them.
Right.
And he himself, I think, had like 23 aerial kills. So he was good at airplanes.
Right.
He promises Hitler, you don't have to send the tanks in.
Yeah.
To conquer the Dunkirk. We will destroy them on the beaches, and they won't be able to be rescued. So, by the way, this is a trend with Goering we're going to see coming up here in a little while.
I'm sure.
So the Panzers are halted. Now, if the Panzers weren't worn out, this doesn't seem like that big of a run, but tanks at this time are really not reliable.
And they only last maybe about 100 miles at that.
100, basically, maybe a tank or two of gas, and then their treads are shot, the engines are shot, transmissions are shot.
Yeah.
We have a hard time imagining that when we want a car that lasts 250,000 miles.
Or
you're not going to get a car that lasts 250,000 miles if you drive it overland all the time.
And again, this isn't like your normal modern style tank, like an M1 Abrams tank that is literally blasting through.
It's got so many horsepower, it's hard to count.
No, I mean these are your they're more of like a small diesel engine in a chassis with some armor.
Yeah, a lot of the early tanks, the early anti-tank guns were literally rifles with like 50 caliber bullets that would penetrate their armor.
Right.
And the German tanks are really not that good compared to the French and the British.
Which is so surprising, especially.
One-on-one battle, the French and British tanks would win most of the time.
Wow.
But they didn't use them right. They broke them up into little bitty units to help support the infantry, which is exactly what they did at the end of World War I.
But now that you've got more tactical advantages of the Germans, especially with their lightning war, the Blitzkrieg, using more of that piercing arrow of this high, heavy tank division.
Yes, a Panzer division.
And just going through as quickly as possible this, the infantry lines, you can't really do anything about it.
Well, I mean, you think about this, you're a battalion of tanks, 32 tanks or so, and you're attached to an infantry division. Well, then a German armored division comes barreling down the road at you with its 100 and some tanks.
You've got no chance.
Yeah, you might be able to do a pretty good fight, but then they're behind you, and then they're knocking you out. Right. By the way, this comes back to when the Americans start fighting the Germans, who have the much better tanks.
Right.
And we have to sacrifice 2 tanks to get the other one around the back. Exactly. And kill them from behind. But So it's not just that the Germans were just listening to Goering.
No.
Because otherwise Manstein and Rundstedt and the gang would have been screaming to let the tanks go. But they needed to regroup too.
Mm-hmm.
And so Dunkirk happens. 300,000 plus French
Yeah.
and British troops are taken off the beach,
Right.
missing most of their equipment.
Well, you can't
A lot of them
bring
took their
a lot of
rifles,
that stuff.
but that's about it.
Well, what else? Why are you going to bring a med kit or?
Well, you can't bring your howitzer.
No.
That,
Well, hey,
you know, that
there's
little
just no
boat,
doubt.
that little boat that only holds 6 guys doesn't
It's-
have time.
mhm.
It's not. Yeah, we're not taking.
No, not going to happen. But again, what we do see, of course, is this defeat that ultimately is an advantage, which is
Well-
quite interesting to see. That a defeat could ultimately end in a positive thing.
I mean, if you play it and say that the Panzers could have gone, you know, that what if?
Right.
If they would have stopped it with only like 50,000 British getting off the beach.
The morale of the British.
Well, the
troops,
British
the British
Isles are almost
citizens,
undefended
Right.
at this point. 50,000 guys who don't have much equipment.
They're not gonna take anything.
You know, Britain's back to the Navy will protect us,
Yeah.
which is where they spend a lot of time.
But
for the next
unfortunately,
year.
if you even think about it that way, a navy can only go so far, especially when we get into your aerial assaults of the Luftwaffe.
Now, fortunately for the British, the Germans never really got good at bombing ships.
That's
Not
true.
like the Japanese or the Americans,
Sure.
especially. They both specialized in it.
Right.
The Germans, not really a naval power, despite the submarines and the Bismarck and the Scharnhorst and all those cool boats.
Hmm.
They're just really not a naval power. Their army is what really makes things happen.
They're more of a
But
land-based.
they're a land-based. I mean, all their enemies are right next door.
Yeah. And so what we finally do see is that, again, as we get to the conclusion of Dunkirk, June 4, 1940,
Mm-hmm.
it does present a morale boost.
Well, yeah, surprisingly enough, despite the fact that, I don't remember who said it, wars are not won by retreats,
No,
this retreat, without this retreat, the war would have been lost.
correct.
I don't know that if they would have lost the entire British Expeditionary Force, plus, of course, what was left of the French army in Belgium that they rescued, that becomes the Free French Army under de Gaulle, I just don't know that they really managed to do much.
Well,
I mean, what do they have to start looking at suing for peace?
ugh.
Because that's what Hitler
He
and his buddy Rudolf Hess.
ultimately wanted to not allow the British in, and to defeat them early, so that way they would they would not have to go and fight that two-front war.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, Hitler and the whole general staff knows they have no plans to invade an island.
No,
They don't. They can barely invade Denmark.
Right.
When you start talking islands.
and barely able to get into Norway without actually.
Right. They
you know,
have to use
having-
regular
yeah.
boats. They don't have like the cool stuff we see in like Sands of Iwo Jima or Flags of Our Fathers.
Right.
Those cool landing craft that the Americans developed, the Higgins boats and stuff.
That just literally drop down the
Oh,
front
yeah,
and
just-
you're gone.
You got a platoon of guys on the beach immediately. The Germans don't have anything like that.
No.
They're literally getting off and rowing to shore.
Maybe
Maybe they get a little motor on the back.
a trolling motor.
But at the fall of Dunkirk, the French are done. Their army is gone in
Well-
Belgium. And the rest of their army, that 78 divisions, that's a lot of army, but it's not trained to fight anywhere but in the Maginot Line.
Like we said off camera, the fact that a man who is trained here at the Maginot Line, he is trained to fight one way. Literally point his weapon the one way and fire.
Yep.
He's not trained, he's not equipped, he's not wanting to really move back and go and fight on this front. This
Yeah.
back front that will eventually become, roughly the Vichy French.
Well,
Eventually.
I mean, you see those little arrows coming off the big line. Well, that's after the panzers are refitted, they're ready to go. They go pouring across. Who is it there? Blot, with his first French army is gone, and it's just no time trying
Right.
to defend Paris.
Right.
The French surrender. And it's a topic. If you go online, you can find all sorts of stuff. You can find what if sites, and the question always is, what would have happened if they would have fought? And the answer really is nothing.
Right.
They didn't have an army to fight with. it would have taken weeks to get these guys reorganized and moved out. By that time, they would have been cut off from their supplies. Well, it would have disintegrated.
And looking at my notes on the dates, and I know we're not big onto the actual specific dates or anything, but you know, Dunkirk is over in June 4, 1940. By June 22nd, the Battle of France ends.
Yep.
So we're talking 2 weeks, not even.
Yeah.
Well, roughly about two and a half weeks.
Yeah, 2.5 weeks.
For this division of panzers to come racing down south and literally destroy the French army.
They go west and south. They take that whole area of Normandy, Brittany, western France, all the way down to the Spanish border. That's what they claim. And they allow Marshal Pétain, who's a famous name from World War I. He's, 1,000 years old?
Pretty much.
Well, he was old in World War I, and
Right.
he's still around. So he's up there in years. He agrees to create a Vichy French. Basically, it's a puppet government. The Nazis tell it what to do,
Yeah.
for the most part, and they occupy the rest of France, which is everything north, well, just about here.
Yeah.
This line here,
Yeah, just
everything
south,
north
yeah.
and west of Paris is German.
Yeah.
So the south of France, really. The part with the wine, I guess.
Right.
So, you know, I guess the French were smart. They took the wine.
Sure.
And of course, we found out in the story you'd found, we'll talk about towards the end of the war, but I didn't know this, that Daladier and the other French premier were arrested and taken into imprisonment camp in Austria.
Right. It's crazy to think.
I just never knew that. I didn't know what they did with them. I never really spent a lot of effort thinking about it, honestly.
Well, and I think it was more along the lines of they wanted to just make sure that they were under wraps in a way.
Well, it's strange to me, though, because when you look at Denmark and Norway and Netherlands and even Belgium, they all sent their kings and queens out.
Into exile.
So they had a head of state
Sure,
outside
sure.
of their country to be a government in exile.
Well, then again, think about it.
But the French did not send Daladier out of the country, although, you know, if we remember back to the Munich conference, his thought that his people were going to lynch him
Right.
for betraying Czechoslovakia, I don't know that he would have gone, but you would assume he'd sent somebody. Instead, you end up with de Gaulle forming this government in exile, which is a strange choice. A wild-eyed colonel from the French army.
Yeah, but
thinks tanks are cool.
yeah, well, unfortunately,
He wasn't wrong.
You're right. and a little bit of foreshadowing, de Gaulle will become a very famous individual. They even name an aeroporte after him.
Well,
you know,
yeah,
but
whole series of republics after him.
well, did you when you went to Europe? Where did you leave out of when you came back?
Oh, when we came home, we left out of Munich. So.
Okay, I was gonna say, you didn't come because you came in through London.
Yeah.
So
we
you
went
didn't
out.
you didn't actually stay, you know, fly into de Gaulle
No,
or
no.
international or anything along those lines. But
Nope.
anyway, chasing that rabbit down that hole. What we do find is again that by roughly mid 1940, Germany is
Dominant in Western Europe.
well, sure.
The Spanish are a fascist government.
So they're allied with them.
Not allied.
Oh,
In a surprising turn of events, Franco, being smarter than a box of rocks,
nice.
says, I can't afford a war. I just had a civil war for,
Sure.
3 or 4 years?
Yeah,
Cities literally burned to the ground, lots of death.
that's true.
He doesn't have any interest in a war. Portugal's been neutral for a long time.
Well, why
Italy-
wouldn't they?
Italy, while France is falling, finally gets up the courage to attack France.
Yes.
Takes a little chunk of the Riviera.
Just a second, little bit.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you also do see Corsica and Sardinia. Now, there's not much there. Okay.
Yeah, well,
But-
Corsica just stays French.
But again, the idea here is that they are moving into, well, their next phase.
Yes.
Which could be either side. Could be going up into the north, into the British Isles, or going south into northern Africa.
North Africa, because, well, the Vichy French government takes control of their colonies.
Sure.
Not all of them go with them.
No.
There's a lot of
Back and
I wouldn't
forth.
say coup, but there's a lot of disagreement. How about that in their overseas colonies?
Sure.
However, Japan, not to be left out of this whole game,
Oh boy.
decides to protect French Indochina by occupying it because the French government has collapsed. So somebody's got to
protect
those poor Vietnamese.
Yes, and Laotians and Cambodians.
And so a guy that we're not going to talk about in this war anymore, named Ho.
Yeah.
He well, Chi actually, Ho is his last name, but for us, anyway, Ho was fighting the French. Now with the Viet Minh, now he's fighting the Japanese for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
So, Japan, we can't ignore them.
No,
things are still going on. They made a move. It was not very popular in Europe or in America.
Of course not.
But nobody was really willing to go to war for a bunch of Vietnamese or Cambodians or Laotians. It just wasn't worth it. And I mean, you're really just exchanging one colonial occupier for another one, so nothing really changed.
Right.
As far as the world's concerned.
Exactly.
And other than rubber, Vietnam doesn't provide much.
Yeah.
But it does provide a lot of rubber.
That's true.
And that'll be very important to the Japanese.
Right.
But in probably one of the most brilliant and ruthless maneuvers of the war, Winston Churchill orders the British fleet to attack the French fleet at Toulon, which is in the Mediterranean.
Yes.
He cannot risk the battleships and the other ships, the carrier of the French fleet, getting taken by the Nazis. It would literally give the Nazis a fleet, a real fleet.
Right, something they have not had.
They've got their cool little ships, but as a fleet, they're just not that effective because ships take a lot of resources, and Germany's been concentrating on their army and air force.
Yeah.
But if they got the French fleet, then they get one for free, and so he orders an attack.
So you mean
on
to
his
tell me?
allies.
I was going to say you're telling me that Winston Churchill, Prime Minister of the British government, said attack the French Navy
unless they were willing to surrender, which for whatever reason, I can't remember the admiral's name of the French fleet, he was going to honor the surrender of his government and place his ships
almost like
into harbor and leave them.
Right.
And
we couldn't have that.
Well, Winston Churchill was like, no, well, he could not risk the idea that suddenly there would be a real navy. The Germans would have have a real navy. Now it would take a while to train some guys to use it, but that's not as big an obstacle as building them.
Yeah, again, it takes less time to train a guy to run a ship than it is to actually take the resources, build the ship, put it out into the ocean. And again, granted, you could go up into the English Channel, you could go down into the Riviera here in the Mediterranean, but again, money, time, resources.
And when you're occupying a country, and this is something I don't know that Hitler really thought forward to. With Poland, they set up the occupation government, the general government, really early. But I don't know that they had a plan for France. He just wanted to humiliate them, which he does. He drags the old rail car out they actually surrendered in.
Yeah, that's true.
I thought that was a nice piece that came out of the Dunkirk movie as well.
Yeah.
But he did his best to humiliate them in every possible way. He made them surrender and sign the documents in the same car the Germans surrendered in 1918. But
a little thumb of your nose up.
Yes, he was ready to pound on them. But I don't know that he had a plan after that. Well, and so he has to come up with these these static divisions that are literally just occupation forces. And then, of course, now he has this entire coastline. Hundreds of miles of coastline that the British can do whatever they want.
Right.
So he's already now the plan is, well, we got to build the Atlantic Wall. We've got to keep Britain out, which is a change of mindset that I think probably hurt them more than anything else because it surrendered the initiative to the British.
True.
Now Germany's not calling the shots. So far they've been calling all the shots.
Right. They've been invading what country they wanted to go to.
Right. We're going to fight where we want to fight, when we want to fight.
Right.
And suddenly it's like, oh.
We got to slow down.
Now, of course, we'll talk next time about the Battle of Britain and the things that come out of that.
Right.
But already in the mindset, I think, of the Germans is they're not going to go any further west unless they can invade Britain. And
well, they can't go any further west because who are they going to go? They could take Britain, sure, but where are they going to go after that?
Ireland, I don't think they'd go after
Well, what are they going to get? A bunch of potatoes and drunks?
Well, the Irish part of me goes, "Hey, you."
Well, I am
but
half myself, so
but
hey,
but
you.
the strategist in me goes, Ireland doesn't really offer a whole lot other than
Right.
farther west bases. But then, if you've taken Britain, what are you basing against now?
Right.
The Americans?
Okay.
The Americans have no way of getting at you.
Nope.
You're not going to launch an amphibious invasion that far from home without a base.
Not even close.
But Denmark has fallen, and I think before we close it up, there's another big development, and another reason probably why nobody did anything about Indochina. Denmark agrees to sell basing rights to the Americans in Iceland and Greenland, because they're still owned by
that's
Denmark
right.
at that time, for 99 years for like $1.
Hey, there you go.
I mean, bargain of
That's
a lifetime.
Yeah.
You don't get lower rents. That's better than rent control.
There you go.
And suddenly America does have bases
For
that
launching.
they can launch, especially with the B-17, which has already been flying.
Mm-hmm.
So now, if, as I'm sure Roosevelt would be thinking at this point, if God forbid Britain falls,
We have to.
we
step
have
up.
the ability to start going after them.
Correct.
We'll have to base out of Iceland. Maybe we'll talk to the Irish because we got a lot of buddies of theirs in Boston
Right.
and Chicago and New York and
Sure.
Philadelphia and
Yes,
everywhere else in the country.
Everywhere else, pretty much in the country, exactly.
Maybe we can convince them to become, part of the Allies, but
We'll see.
we'll see. It's an important strategic development that doesn't get mentioned a lot because there's no battles. It's
Right.
just a sign. The Danish government in exile signed some papers in New York or D.C. and
On away we go.
And suddenly the United States is sending troops. Not very many.
Well,
More like we're here, by the way.
yeah. It's
kind of level.
It's a hey, we're on your radar, so watch it.
But both Greenland not so much, but Reykjavik is a pretty good port,
Oh, for sure.
and so that would become the basing area.
In a way, again, yeah, you're not. Well, you're within what, a couple hours flight from Britain.
Well, in a B-17, probably 6 or 8, but
still
doable.
Sure.
Because a lot of the German targets with B-17 were that far.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I think that would be a good place for us to stop for today in the idea of where we are right now. We're right there, right around July of 1940. Hitler is very much at his
Happy.
end.
He's done a little jig in Paris because he eliminated the French.
He took his
But
picture in front of the
Germany is either conquered,
occupied.
either occupied or allied with most of Europe, and the parts
Sure.
of Europe that he doesn't, that are on the mainland, either already like him anyway.
Oh yeah.
Romania, Bulgaria, Spain,
Right.
they're all fascists
Right.
too.
Right.
Hungary, they've been allies for a while now.
Sure.
Portugal's independent and couldn't do anything anyway because they'd have to
Sure.
fight all the
Yeah.
way through Spain to get
Yeah,
there.
that's not going to happen.
And Italy, of course, is now officially his ally. They've moved into France, so they're at war.
Mhm.
And the war shifts north and south.
Yeah.
So,
Instead of east and west.
we'll
So we'll pick up next time. So make sure you tune in.